Welcome back to another episode of Frenchie's Forge. In this episode, we're going to be making a cool file knife, and I got a design kind of traced out on a piece of folder paper. We have it stuck to this file that I got from a friend, and we're going to cut out a knife shape and turn this hunk of file into a knife. That's why making file knives is so cool, because you don't have to have a forge to make a knife. You pretty much just have to have abrasives to cut and grind bevels and maybe a drill, and this is a great beginner project, turning a file into a knife. I've done several of these, and although I do make knives and heat treat my own blades, I still enjoy doing these. I think that they have a really cool and unique look. And if you go back and watch some of my other videos, a good portion of them are file knives. So anyway, I'm really excited to turn this into a blade for a friend. I've got a really cool idea for the handle. The guy, John, gave me this file, and it's gonna be his knife. He also gave me a bunch of walnut that we're gonna try to incorporate in the handle. Hopefully this will be a really good knife, and it's going to a good home and a good dude. So we're gonna start by getting out the spray paint and covering this, and then removing the magnets and the paper, and that way we'll have a pattern of a blade onto the file, and we can get it cut out. So now that we've taken a little bit of time to profile out the blade some on the angle grinder and the belt grinder, we are ready to put in the 45-degree initial bevels. We're going to be using an old, I think that's like a 40 grit belt to break this hard edge first before we switch to a new belt. And we're probably going to bring the bevels up fairly high on this one. One cool thing about doing file knives is seeing the file texture on the actual knife, so we're going to still want to leave some of that on here. But I want this to be a pretty good cutting knife, and in order to do that, we're going to have to thin this out quite a bit. I'm not sure what the thickness is on this file. It's probably 3/16, something like that, maybe. So it's not the thickest file ever, but it's certainly not a little skinny one. It'll be pretty good. I think we're going to thin it out pretty good towards the edge, and then still have a good thick spine on the top. And as I'm moving along through this and looking at it, I might make some minor adjustments to the belly and the handle. You can see we already cut off quite a bit on the back compared to the original drawing. And that tends to happen for me. You know, you have a good idea and you put it on paper and it looks cool on paper, and then when you cut it out and put it in your hand, it just doesn't feel right, or you think it could be better in some ways. So I kind of change the design sometimes. I'm not the best at drawing knives. I don't really have a, you know, the artist flair. I don't draw things. I'm not super great at that part. But once we get it cut out in the paper and put it in your hand, then you can just kind of go off of that. And that's typically what I do. But I think so far this is a pretty cool design. we're going to have kind of this flat top here. I don't know if I'm going to be putting in like a false edge or a swedge up here at all. But I've seen some designs that I think look cool, and mostly called like hunters or a hunter knife that have this really flat, straight top. And I really like that. So I haven't really made one of those yet. This will be the first one of those. So anyway, let's go ahead and break in the bevels on this thing. I've already got it center line marked, and we're ready to cut this in. So how about I quit blabbing and let's do it. All right, so now that we've spent a little bit of time putting in the initial 45-degree bevels onto this knife, we are now ready to move to a fresh belt and continue bringing these bevels on up towards the spine of the knife. And really, this step is good to use a used belt. And you can see here, this is a 40 grit belt that I have used on probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 knives now. And you can see that a lot of the abrasives have come off of there. Now, it still cuts fine. It's just not as sharp or as, you know, pointy as a new one. Here's a new one that I have here. Now, these are 2 different belts, but they're the same grit. They're both ceramic belts. And you can kind of see the difference there. This one has a lot more jaggedness to it, and that's just because it hasn't been used yet. But if you were to try to do this step and break that hard edge, especially on an already heat-treated blade, all of these little pokes, or whatever you want to call them, would come right off of there within, you know, a couple of seconds, really. So it's really important to use a used belt during this step. And then once you get past this step, you're pretty much ready to just start grinding away at more of a flat surface here. You're not breaking a hard edge. So that's really important and a really good tip. And you hear other people talk about that, but it really is important to do, especially because the belts won't last very long if you're constantly knocking all the abrasives off of them in the first couple of passes. So definitely a good tip. The other thing that we're trying to do during this step is pretty much just, you know, kind of keep the center line of this blade in the center. You know, you want to make sure that as you're looking down it, that it's relatively even and that you've taken off the same amount of material on each side, that your plunge area looks similar. And this would be the time to make small adjustments if you wanted to move your plunge line jig or your belt along the platen. There's lots of different adjustments you could make, but this would be the time to do that before continuing up the blade. So yeah, really, that's kind of the whole point of doing this step, is just to kind of set yourself up for success. And this is looking pretty good. This is pretty typical. I won't bring them up, you know, very high, just about to where they're at before I throw on a brand new belt that will then cut pretty well. So anyway, we're ready to do that. We're going to go ahead and throw on a new belt and continue bringing these bevels on up to the top of the spine. Okay, so now that we've spent a little bit of time putting the bevels in with our fresh belt, and we have both sides looking pretty good, pretty even, we're ready to switch to the next belt and start working these up just a little tiny bit higher. And the goal in switching belts is going from a 36 or 40 grit up to about a 120. It's going to take some of those deep scratches out, and it's really going to sort of define this edge here in between the bare metal and the file marks. And then that way when we're done, we'll have a very distinct line. Right now, it's really hard to do that with a you know, heavier grit belt. You can kind of see the metal and then this little band of file and then the dark part. So what the 120 grit belt will do will be getting rid of this little band here and smoothing it out. So it'll be a really good transition in between the metal into the darker file. Normally at this step, when I am done with the 36 grit or 40 grit, I take the file guide off. I suppose you could leave it on. It's not going to hurt anything to leave it on, but I just like to take it off and get rid of it. I don't feel like it's necessary to have it on there anymore. So yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. We have a good ricasso area. The handle scales will probably cover something like that, so you'll still see this little part here. And yeah, I think it's going pretty good so far. So now we're going to throw on the 120, like I said, and kind of continue shaping this out. All right, so now that we've spent a little bit of time with the 120 grit belt and we've got this thing smoothed out pretty good, we are ready to put some holes in the handle. And there's kind of a shot of the bevels, and they're looking pretty good. They're pretty even on both sides. Got a nice center mark there. Now, of course, we still have some file bits right up in here, but when we go to sharpen that, those will come out. But yeah, we got both sides looking really good. So we're pretty much ready to start working on the handle some. And in order to do that, we're going to need to drill a couple of holes here for some pins. And because this is a file and it's already hard, we're going to have to anneal the tang here. So to do that, we've got a bucket of water. We're going to stick the knife in it to keep the blade portion cool. And then using our MAP gas, we're just going to run some heat on the handle and try to get it up to a pretty good heat, up into the red colors, and then slowly let it cool to hopefully soften it some. And there you go. You can see the red starting to appear, and that's kind of what we're looking for, is kind of that really dull cherry red. And that's going to be pretty good for the most part. And you can tell that it's going to be right in the area that we want to put our pin. So we're going to have two pins on this one. One right where we just got it hot, and the other one will be closer to the blade. So we'll go ahead and do the heat, run the heat up a little further up the handle and get that front pin. All right, so now that we're good and def, we now have some holes put into the handle. As I'm sure you could hear, maybe I'll cut that out and edit that part to save your ears, but it's rather very loud and annoyingly screechy sound trying to drill through hardened steel. The annealing process worked to an extent. It got it definitely softer than what it was before. Not quite, you know, ideal, but we were able to drill a couple of holes. And then use this kind of like a cone step bit, whatever you want to call it, to kind of chamfer the holes, and you can kind of see there's step down there. But anyway, now that we're here, we're ready to pick out a handle material. We've got everything smoothed out really well along the handle. The cutting edge is nice and centered. The bevels look pretty well good and clean and identical. And I think it's going to look really cool in the end product here. You're going to have this shiny blade portion, then the file, and then some more shine on the end of the knife. So I think that that will be pretty cool once it's all polished up, and yeah, it's turning out pretty good. So now over here at the bandsaw, we have the material that we're going to be using for the handle. We have a piece of walnut that John gave me. We have a tent stake that we're going to use for the pin. I don't know if this is stainless or mild, not really sure, but it I think is about the right size for what we need. Then we have some yellow G10 liners and some black vulcanized paper liners. So it'll be kind of like a double liner deal, and I've done that before, and it kind of looks pretty cool. And then this last piece that we're going to try to incorporate is just a piece of epoxy resin that I threw together probably 6 months ago. And I don't know, it's kind of cool. I haven't really used my own epoxy resin before in a knife. I typically buy them online, and normally they're like a different material, acrylic or something. So kind of anxious to see how this will work. It's definitely good and hard. There's really not a whole lot of bend to it. It's pretty rigid and stiff, so I think it's going to work out pretty good. Plus, I think it's going to look nice with the brown matching the walnut, the gold flake kind of hitting the yellow, and then it should have some hints of red in it as well. So I'm excited to throw this thing together and see what it looks like. I'm going to start by getting some of these materials cut out and into the shapes we need them to start gluing up the handle. Okay, so now that we got the handle pieces ready, we are ready to glue them up. So using some 5-minute epoxy, we're going to have to be pretty quick with this. This handle has a lot of pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces that we need to get glued up in under 5 minutes. Start the clock. Okay, so while we're waiting for the handle to dry, we've got our maker's mark ready to go here, and pretty much just using the same setup that I normally do. I electrochemically etch my mark using some Cricut vinyl stencil and the various stuff on the table. I had a idea the other day. So as I was just sitting out here kind of quickly doodling a knife shape, this would be like a, I don't know, kitchen blade or something. But inside of our living room, I pass by a bunch of these. My wife is into crystals and gemstones, and she makes jewelry using these and wire. She really makes some really beautiful stuff, necklaces, bracelets, earrings, all kinds of really cool stuff. But we have a bunch of these in all different shapes and colors, and I just thought, you know what, that would be super cool having this as the handle, and was kind of interested to see if there are any out there. I looked it up online and couldn't find a single picture of a knife with this sort of a handle. Now, I didn't spend forever. Maybe there are some out there, but I did not find any. And I think that this would be a super cool idea. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think? Do you think that that would make a cool knife handle? I know I do. And I'm sure there'd be some challenges getting this thing drilled out to fit a tang down inside, but man, that would be super cool. And maybe here in the future, I might attempt to make something like that. So anyway, let me know what you think. If you'd like to see me attempt to make something like that, let me know. And let me know what you think. Anyway, let's get back to putting our maker's mark on this knife for Mr. John. Well, it's Sunday evening and the sun is setting here in beautiful Nicholson, Missouri at Frenchie's Forge. And I feel like it's a pretty good place to wrap this episode up. We made some really good progress. We got this file that John gave me and we turned it into a really cool knife. We've got the bevels ground, we got it profiled, we got our maker's mark on there, we got the holes drilled, we have the blade tempered, and we threw together the handle scales for this knife. Now they look really rough right now, but once we clean them up, I think that epoxy and yellow and black liners on this walnut is going to give this knife some justice. I really think it's going to turn out super cool. I'm glad that you decided to hang out with me today and watch the video. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something, or at the very least were somewhat entertained. Every bit of support that you can give me is much appreciated, whether that's a thumbs up or a comment or hitting that subscribe button. That really helps me out and keeps me motivated to continue filming some of the knife builds that I do. I really enjoy it, and in all honesty, I'll probably keep on doing them anyway, but it is cool to at least let me know what you think in the comments. Do you like where this is headed? Do you think we have a good knife ahead of us here? Would you do something different? Let me know in the comments what you think. And yeah, stay tuned for part 2, where we're going to be throwing this handle onto this beautiful knife and wrapping up, shaping it, and putting an edge on it. And then I cannot wait to send it off to Mr. John so that he can have a brand new knife to, you know, cut stuff with. Anyway, glad that you stuck around till this point. Really appreciate it, and we'll catch you on the next one.